What I'm really talking about is a battle cry to put down the tool of meditating and pick up the tool for the next part of the journey. If I'm doing a triathlon, right, I don't take my bike on the swim. I put the bike down and I do the swim, right? I don't wear my swimming goggles. Well, you may, but you're probably not going to wear your swimming goggles and bathing suit for the running part. You're probably going to have your running shoes and have your running clothes. But what I find people are doing is they're doing the whole triathlon on a bicycle and wondering why they're drowning.
Welcome to the Midland Money Mindset. This is a podcast that's all about getting your mind right when it comes to all things money. In every episode, we go deep with engaging guests who provide tangible takeaways and a whole lot of joy along the way. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I enjoyed having them. Let's dive into today's show. I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Midland Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Midland Financial. Today's guest is Dan Mangena, motivational speaker, author, and coach at Dream with Dan. Dan, at the age of 27, received a diagnosis of Aspergers. This late diagnosis caused Dan to experience what can only be described as a life-shattering trauma. Daniel spent the next 7 years struggling to keep these revelations and events from spilling into every area of his life. As a result of his struggles, Daniel built a simple 4-step system called the Beyond Intention Paradigm, which helped transform his life from misery to celebration. Through his own struggles, Daniel found a path to lasting joy and purpose, and he wants nothing more than to share the tools that saved his life and help others. Through his motivational speeches, Dan shares his vision of empowerment and joy. The books he has authored, along with his podcast, Do It With Dan, the blogs, articles, and worldwide workshops have all helped thousands across the globe. Dan's mission is to empower others to move towards their dream life with confidence. Listen in and hear about Dan's journey from crushing diagnosis and depression to creating a system that helped him and is now helping thousands of others to live a life of abundance, joy, and purpose. Well, hello, everybody. Larry Sprung here, and I have the pleasure of having Dan Mangena, motivational speaker, author, and coach of Dream with Dan. Thanks for joining us today, Dan.
Thank you for having me, Larry. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show. And listen, I want you to have an opportunity to tell our audience about your path to where you are today. You know, as a motivational speaker, best-selling author, and Wall Street Journal master of success. How did you get here?
Well, the master of success thing is just relationships, which I'm sure you will understand. We just realize we know some of the same people and all of the things.
Sure.
Especially nowadays, the digital world has made everything much smaller. Globalization means you got to be careful of relationships. I've had people who, I love to say the whole one night stand versus long-term relationship, right? You've got the churn and burn mentality, people just trying to get what they can. But people that foster good relationships, actually looking to serve and actually looking to add to the relationship, are not only going to be remembered, their name's going to be spoken forward in a good way. So
abundance mindset.
You know what I'm talking about. So if you'd seen my name and it came up, oh, I've got this guy, Dan Mangena, and I'd screwed over, for example, our mutual friend Justin, or I hadn't been great with him, or he would say, I don't know about that. And even if you kept this meeting, the energy, the pre-frame is going to be different. So me getting into the Wall Street Journal was a matter of one relationship led to another relationship that led to another relationship. And it's me basically paying it forward, and having good relationships meant that I ended up with one of my mentors who's like, hey, we're running a feature in the Wall Street Journal. I'd love to put you forward. I'm like, yeah, put me forward.
There you go.
And that's how it happened.
Well, did you get that like penciled profile sketch, or you're not there yet with the Wall Street Journal? All right.
Not with the solo feature yet.
All right. Well, you'll get there.
We've got that one on the list.
What was your path to where you are today as a Dream with Dan motivational speaker? How did you get here?
Incidentally, I really wasn't interested in any of this stuff. So I made my first million when I was 19 years old, and everything went horribly wrong. I didn't know what I was doing, completely messed up the whole thing, ended up losing it all within about a year or something like that. What happened was we didn't have the right paperwork and licenses for the business that we're in. And so the government was like, well, you need a license for that. So we'll have all of that. So all of that went. Then I went off and started the consulting. I realized people would pay me money just to pick my brain. And here I was, this 19, 20-year-old, far too cocky for his own good, that people were willing to pay just to hear what he had to say. So I did that and built up another business doing that. And then promptly everything got stolen because I trusted the wrong people and everything got stolen. So I'm 23, 24 years old now. sitting now and looking at the debris of my failures and realizing that maybe I don't know everything. Maybe I'm not Johnny Big Balls that I thought I was, that kind of had it all worked out. Because I got into personal development, mindset, visualization, all this kind of stuff about the age of 16. So I was ordering stuff from, Nightingale Conant online and reading books and listening to tapes. I think I listened to The Wisdom of Solomon and the 80-20 principle when I was like 16, 17 years old.
Right.
I was on it. And that contributed certainly to my success. But again, I didn't have the experience and I didn't know how to hold a certain level of success and wealth. So it promptly left. So here I am looking at this and I'm like, well, I spent the last few years of my life telling everyone I know everything and really arrogantly sort of throwing my successes around. And here I was without the evidence to back that. In fact, evidence to the contrary, that I don't know what I want. And actually, I recognize now looking back that so much of my identity was tied up in my successes that when that was gone, I didn't have anything left. And the fact is, Larry, the only reason why I didn't actually follow through with an out and out suicide attempt is I had such little belief in myself at the time that I thought I would fail. And I didn't want to be the loser, quote unquote loser, that couldn't even pull off his own suicide. And so, get this, I set off on a mission to find out what was wrong with my manifesting so I could successfully commit suicide without failing. And that ended up being a journey that I've been on since 2008 to today, where at some point, I couldn't really tell you where, I pummeled and polluted myself with so much positivity that I actually ended up choosing life accidentally when I was really quite intentful on what I was doing before, and sharing that journey and the methods and methodologies and lessons that I've learned on the way through my books, through my podcasts, and through my speaking and coaching.
Wow. So I don't know if you know this about me. This show's about you, but just to share a little about me, I'm on the national board for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Wow.
So that is something, mental health and suicide prevention is something that's very important to me. I lost my brother-in-law in 2004.
Wow.
He died by suicide. And it's with people like yourself telling your story and sharing it that I feel brings suicide out of the darkness, mental health out of the darkness, and gives people an opportunity and a vision that they can actually get help and they can actually overcome just like any other disease. It's possible. So thank you for sharing that story and that part. One of the things that I found very interesting about you was you basically received very late in life, is my understanding, a diagnosis of Asperger's at the age of 20, I believe.
27,
right?
It was 27 when I got the diagnosis,
Okay. Which I believe is much later. Typically, as a child, those diagnoses come in. And how did you deal with and react to that? I mean, is that part and parcel to your experiences that you just shared with us?
Actually, it's probably the saving grace. Because when I look at how my brain works, being on the autistic spectrum, I'm pretty blinking sure that the reason why I didn't have the impulsive reaction to just go and give it a try is because my Asperger's brain steps through everything very logically and slowed everything down for me to come to a conscious choice that I'm going to try and get it right. So all that happened when I was about 23, 24. The diagnosis came about 4 years later, and it actually saved me because I realized that the crippling social anxiety, the crippling general anxiety, the debilitating insomnia that I'd suffered for pretty much as long as I could remember were all tied to me being on the spectrum and trying to function in a mainstream world. When I got that diagnosis, what ended up happening was I was able to get the right resources, the right support, and also identify what my skills and superpowers were so I can actually apply those to what I do now. So even the way that I take complicated concepts, I might talk about quantum-y type principles or even talking about the way the brain works and how we loop meditation and mindfulness into actual success and all of this stuff. It's because my brain can take everything and systemize it. So it's actually been a gift and a blessing. A part of me wishes maybe I had been diagnosed when I was like a kid or a teenager, so there wouldn't have been many sleepless nights. But I'm a firm believer that our journey's been our journey. And by celebrating that and looking for the strengths that we can pull from it, the lessons we can pull from it, we're a lot better served than wanting to go back and change things from being something different.
What led you to even try to uncover this diagnosis or led you down that path to kind of figure it out? Was it just because of what was going on in your early 20s that you were like, hey, something's not right here. I need an answer? Or
it was an accident. It was an absolute accident. And why I like to say a blessing, really, Larry, because I was having another crippling spate of insomnia. I went to the doctors and I said, hey, can I get some sleeping tablets? I needed some prescribed sleeping tablets because over-the-counter medicines weren't working at all for this particular time. I was doing the chamomile tea. I was meditating and slowing down and turning off the TV and turning the lights off and just wide awake for about 2 weeks or something like that. The doctor gives me a very, very strong sleeping pill called Zopicline. He's only allowed to give me 3. In the UK, apparently, he could only give 3 because it's so addictive. So you can't take more than 2. Take 1. If that doesn't work, take another half. If you need more than 2, you're going to have to come back. So did 1, wide awake, 1.5, wide awake, 2, wide awake, back to the doctor. He says, look, there's obviously something going on in the brain. I need to refer you to a therapist. Like, okay, cool. The therapist he referred me to happened to be a woman that specialized, Dr. Helen McEwen, I will love her for life, that specialized in working with adults with autism.
Wow.
It just so happened. So it wasn't that that's what happened, that I went there for that, but she saw the symptoms. It's so funny. After that, everyone's like, hey, are you on the spectrum? It's like, where were you my entire life? But yeah, it just so happened that the therapist I was referred to, Dr. Helen, worked with adults with autism, saw the clues, followed the breadcrumbs, didn't tell me what she was looking for at first, just kind of took me through the process of therapy. And then about a month and a half into the process, month and a half, she's like, hey, can you do this test? And it turned out I'm very, very high on the autistic spectrum.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, because like you've seen, people who suffer from mental illness, depression, whatever you want to wrap it around, there are so many tools available to help you work through it. But at the same time, it's so difficult to find the ones that work for you. Stick with them long enough to make sure that it works or doesn't work and then move on to the next. And I think that's something that's very difficult. But let's move along for a second, because you talk a lot about living your life by building a system called Beyond Intention Paradigm.
Correct.
What is that all about, and how did this help you?
Okay. Well, Beyond Intention was literally me taking a systemized approach to what I'd gone through and really trying to put it down. Because I want to say around 2010, 11 is when I really started to realize, oh, I'm kind of choosing life here. I'm not down in the dumps all the time. I'm kind of moving forward. And I'd started to write about my experiences. Back end of 2009, I started to write and went to write my story. Just to get it out of my head and get it down on paper, really start to try and process everything. And as I started to come out on the other side and start to see things kind of rebuild and my life kind of come back together, I started to see these common threads. And these common threads became the 4 steps of Beyond Intention. And that work continues to evolve today. I think that I'm an ongoing student of life. I'm always learning.
Aren't we all?
I'm always investing in my personal development and different coaching, different programs, and always trying to evolve. And so the work that I'm doing evolves. But it started with these very 4 simple steps, which are accept, clear, gratitude, and listen. And if it would serve you in the audience, I'd love to go into what those 4 steps are and what they mean.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
So step number 1 is all about the mindset with which I approach my life as a whole. And what we do with Beyond Intention is we accept responsibility radically. So step 1 is I'm the author and creator of my life. Everything that's shown up has been a product of either my conscious or unconscious choices, but it's my choice. My thoughts have led me to here. Now, I can blame people, I can pass the buck, but ultimately, if I recognize a simple mathematical truth that I'm the only common denominator in every experience, if I start with me, then there will be changes across the board. So that's not to say that other people don't have an impact. It's not to say that other people don't actually have some blame, but I can't change other people as effectively as I can change myself. And if I change me, even if it's how I respond to other people, I can actually start to claim some dominion back and do something with my life. So that's step number 1.
Sure.
Step number 2 invites us to come back to another simple truth, that the only point in time that's actually real is now. The past are memories. Even by the time that we reflect on something that's happened, even by the time we actually listen to something that we've said, we're still looking at the past. Because by the time that the sensory inputs have got into the senses, into the brain and been processed, it's a memory. Everything's a memory. The future hasn't happened yet. It's all expectation, whether from fear or from faith or from excitement or from doubt or anxiety, whatever it is, it's all in the future. So if I want to make effective choices to take advantage of this dominion that I've accepted through step 1, I need to be now. So step 2 is all about healing from trauma of the past, letting go of expectations of that timing in the future, and coming back to now so I can make new choices to create new outcomes. Step 3, I just remembered I was doing all 3 or 4.
That's okay.
Step 3 is gratitude. And gratitude isn't what you'd expect. It's not being grateful for what happened. It's actually about starting to build positive expectation by getting into a place of gratitude before something happens. That changes the neurochemistry of the brain and the body. It actually changes my habits and behaviors. It changes my thought processes and makes me able to step into what I want. Step 4 is listen, which is very simple. We're human. Nobody's switched on all the time. Nobody's going to be getting it right every day. Nobody's going to be a champion every day. No one's going to be positive every day. You're not going to have an up quarter every quarter. Your kids aren't going to love you every day. You're not going to catch every ball game. But I can honor and love myself in spite of my humanity. And in the face of that self-love, in the face of that compassion, pay attention to what's going on with my thoughts and my feelings and assess whether they are accepting, whether they're present, and whether they're embodying what I want, I can course correct if they're not, and I can celebrate if they are. And that's beyond intention.
That's great. And I think those are very key and important points. And I think if we start utilizing those in our life, I can see how they can be very, very, very helpful. You also talk about importance of alignment.
Mm-hmm.
What are people aligning to? What do you mean by that? What's the importance there?
So one of the things I preach is pontificate on is that we're not one-dimensional, right? You have people that teach about mindset, great. But then you have people that take it to the degree of saying mindset is the only thing that matters. Or you've got people that teach you high performance habits and all this. Oh, high performance habits, that's what's going to make it happen. Or come and do my latest Reiki, Dubri, what's it, meditation, visualization, healing chant, right?
Right.
But we don't just exist as vibration. We don't just exist as thought form. We don't just exist as physical reality. We're all of these things. So when I'm speaking about alignment, I'm saying, well, let's be clear on what we want to create. Right, let's break the habit of being a slave to our programs and be intentional. And then let's start to create some alignment in how we feel, which is the first point of contact with our vibration. Let's get into alignment with what we believe, so those thought forms can actually match what we want. And let's get into alignment with how we're behaving, so that we're actually embodying what we want. And if we start to do that, maybe, just maybe, we're going to start having more success and creating more of what we want.
Yeah, and that can be used virtually in every area of your life, right? If you figure out that main alignment and then apply it to all those areas of your life, I would imagine it just makes for a much better experience overall for you, right?
100%.
So one of the things I found interesting, because especially in this day and age, coming out of we're in the pandemic, there's been a lot of talk about meditation, coming back to our ground and relaxing ourselves. I even, there were certain points during the pandemic that I'm not a big meditator, but I found myself utilizing the Peloton app and utilizing their meditation just to relax a little bit. Now, very interesting. You tell people stop meditating.
Yep.
Why? When we hear about all these benefits, why are you telling people or preaching that we should be stopping to meditate?
And here's the key, Larry. I didn't say we shouldn't. I said we should stop. For something to stop, it has to have been in motion in the first place. So what I'm really talking about is a battle cry to put down the tool of meditating and pick up the tool for the next part of the journey. If I'm doing a triathlon, right, I don't take my bike on the swim. I put the bike down and I do the swim, right? I don't wear my swimming goggles. Well, you may, but you're probably not going to wear your swimming goggles and bathing suit for the running part. You're probably going to have your running shoes and have your running clothes. But what I find people are doing is they're doing the whole triathlon on a bicycle and wondering why they're drowning. Right? Again, coming back to this thing about we're multidimensional. Spiritual practice, mindfulness, these tools are very powerful. But you don't take your car into space. You drive your car on the road and your spaceship stays in space. For each level of our experience, there's a different tool, a different way that we need to show up, a different thing that we need to do. People that go and get wrapped up completely on what their shaman said, or their guru, their spiritual healer, or their minister, their priest, and what have you. Yeah, but what about your belief systems? Because I can pray all day long for abundance. And God can send 100 different ways for me to get that abundance. If in my mind I don't believe I'm worthy or that I can have that thing, my reticular activating system is going to flick on, shut down and filter it out. I'm not going to see it. Doesn't matter how positive my thinking is, as I've seen firsthand experience. If I don't know how to hold or do the thing, I'm going to mess it up. So when I'm calling people to stop meditating, when I'm calling people to stop meditating, saying, yeah, meditate, do your chant, do your prayer, go to your temple, go to your synagogue, go to your mosque, go to your church, do your thing. But let's take care of those beliefs and that mindset, and let's take care of those habits and behaviors to make sure everything syncs up and leads to what we want to create. Sorry.
So basically, don't just rely on the meditation to get you where you need to be from where you are today, more or less.
There we are.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. How are you helping people today, right? How are you helping? How is Dan helping individuals? And who are the ideal people for you to work with? Or is there an ideal person, or is everybody a potential person who Dan can help?
Well, I think Dan can help the people who are aligned with how Dan helps. Because, if we talk about, the mind for a moment, the mind only understands imprints. But we have imprints that we're going to have enough of alignment with for us to be able to get the message. You have some people that need a bit more of a gentle approach, and some people for whom they need more of a stern approach. If I give the stern approach to someone who needs the gentle, or gentle to the person who needs the stern, there's not going to be any change.
Right.
Talking about the meditation, not everybody's fit for meditation. For some people, the meditation is when they're having a run, when they're having a walk. Maybe for some, it's a walking meditation on the beach. And for some, it's going to be sitting down in absolute silence. Some people like guided, some people don't. My approach isn't going to work for everybody. And what I find is those that resonate with my approach, they get results. resonate with the approach and want to put the work in.
Right.
Those here's the thing, I actually tweeted this today. Do you want it to be easy or do you want it to work?
Right.
You know, anyone who's looking for a popcorn solution that's going to get them there in 5 minutes, or anyone who runs around on Instagram typing, yes, I affirm under those posts that say you're going to have your abundance in the next 30 days, probably isn't my person. Someone who's ready to actually put some work in, get uncomfortable, just not opening up to recognizing that they don't know what they don't know. We might get somewhere. I tend to work with people who have some experience with some kind of mindfulness or spiritual practice, only because I'm going to start there.
Right.
If you think all of it's woo-woo nonsense, then we're probably not going to dive together. It'd be better if you did, but we're probably not going to dive. But the place that I focus most is on financial abundance. And people are like, what do you mean? You're materialistic, you know, all you care about is money and blah, blah, blah. And I say, no. First and foremost, we live in a world where the most easiest medium of exchange is money.
Right.
Okay. If I want more choice, money's going to make it happen. It's not going to make me happy, but it's certainly going to afford me more choices so that I can actually reach for those things that are going to make me feel more alive. Okay. Also, if I'm stressed about money, I'm not going to really have a conducive space with which to create alignment with my purpose or to go and share my gifts with the world. I'm going to be in fight or flight mode. So I focus on financial abundance because A, it's the easiest method of exchange. B, if you haven't got money, you're going to find it very hard to do anything else. And also 3, it's just an easy measuring stick. If I'm teaching you, for example, how to create your own reality, I say, okay, follow these steps and go and create, $100, $1,000. If you don't hit it, we know something's wrong. And if you hit it, we know it works. We can then take that and apply it to your health, apply it to your relationships, apply it to finding your purpose, to your career. So that's what I do. Those are the kind of people I love to hang out with, and the people that it's probably not going to work for too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, we're not here for everybody, right? We want to align with those that, like you say, understand and align with us. Mm-hmm. And if you enter it with that abundance mindset instead of scarcity mindset, mm-hmm. it puts you in a much better situation to cater to those people and be able to find them, right? Because if you have that scarcity mindset, it kind of puts blinders on, if not goggles over your eyes, and you really can't see at all. It makes it very difficult. Could you share perhaps a story from working with one or a couple of your clients where you help overcome an obstacle or a stressor in their life and move past it to get great abundance?
Sure.
I think that would be telling.
Sure. So we've got a concept that I teach called money DNA. People are like, what's money DNA? Well, one thing I've come to realize is that just the way like our genetic DNA unfolds as to who we are, the height that we are, the hair color, we don't have to do anything for that. It just unfolds naturally from that place. But when I started backtracking people's money situation backwards, there were telltale signs that the same thing was happening with finances too. The DNA just shows up differently. It shows up energetically and mentally versus physically, although there's going to be some physical components too. So one of the things we do is we do a host of different archetypes and we track those and we investigate where people have the most natural flow towards creating wealth and abundance. And sometimes people get uncomfortable hearing that because they've got stories or pain points around how they naturally grew with money. So one of the guys that's in my program, my Micro to Millions program, which is the signature work that we do, he came in, he was making about 35 grand a year. He was a very reluctant landlord. He did a bit of consulting. He had the roof over his head, but he wasn't really in a great place. Relationship wasn't really where he wanted it to be and so forth. And he's great, very talented musician. And what he wanted to do, I've got this passion for music. I want to sell my music, and that's how I want to create my wealth and abundance. And I said, okay, cool. But let's look at society and your experience of society. Have you seen first, second, or third hand anybody who's made wealth and abundance through this path? Of course, the answer was no. And one of the things that people lose sight of is unless I've got first, second, sometimes third hand experience, my mind's not going to hold it to be true that it's possible for me to do that. So the likelihood that I'm going to be able to create that way is very low. And what I invite people to, and this is for the listeners too, if I start to chase something for which I've got no evidence of working, then isn't that a clear sign that I'm self-sabotaging, using my time, my energy, my resources to do something that probably isn't going to work? So what I instead did was I asked him, went through the process, and it turned out that he had 30 years of experience in real estate. But what had happened is 2008, he got very badly stung and really didn't want to have anything to do with real estate because of the pain that he had around that. So we did some clearing around that, cleared up that energy field. We started reshaping his belief systems and opening him up to receiving again. Right now, he's on about $500,000 a year in income, and that's only going up. And he's actually doing a deal right now that's going to put him in my 7-figure club. But it happened because, number one, he was open to change. B, he was open to being coached. But we were able to take him into his money DNA and show how that was going to create more flow. Now he's having fun. He's working a couple of hours a week. He was showing off to me just yesterday. He flew from his place in Arkansas to LA to go and have a date with someone for the night and flew back and did it all first class. And he was happy as Larry. But his health has improved. His quality of life has improved. He's actually going to be moving down here to Cabo now as well. Working less, more fun, more play, honoring where he's at, but most importantly, being open to making some changes based on what he thought he knew and to seeing doing things a different way.
That's very interesting because that came from a situation where his money DNA was his own personal situation firsthand, where he experienced this huge pain point in 2008, where there was probably this tremendous loss. Do you find that just as equally as you see situations where individuals experience that type of pain point firsthand, don't you think it's far more often where you see people who have experienced it secondhand through a family member or through their upbringing, and they're bringing all of that baggage, so to speak, with what they experienced growing up? And
100%.
many times that is their limiting belief. Is that more common than firsthand, or what do you think?
100%. I mean, when we look at the complexity of the brain and how the identity builds over time, a big part of that identity is what we start taking in when we're young, learning from the environment to be, this is the way the world works. And then the brain goes off and starts to form ideas, filter out and create patterns of behavior around that. So even someone that doesn't even have a conscious relationship to the fact that they had perhaps limiting beliefs happening, limiting narratives, or pain points that they witnessed, even if they didn't have a conscious awareness of that, at an unconscious level, that's going to be filtering out the choices, what they can see, what they're ready to go out and do, and what they're going to move towards. So 100%, we're all the product of an environment. I mean, my son's 5 months old, okay? And right now, he hasn't got words. I don't remember what it was like to be 5 months old. Do you? I don't remember my stepdaughter was 5. I don't remember being 5 years old. But right now, the identity is being built in this time as to how they're going to show up. A lot of the money DNA that people are working with is actually coming from that time and sometimes beyond. There's evidence to show now that even when we're in the womb, we're taking in imprints. There's evidence to show that through our actual genealogy, we can get trauma. We can get limiting beliefs. We can get things actually passed through. So there's a lot of it coming through. But one thing I want to make sure the listeners realize is that we're not ever a slave to it.
Right.
We're never a slave to it. We can always do something about it.
There's always a way to change it.
Exactly.
Well, you'll have to get your 5-month-old. I highly recommend it. What I call a bank, where, a piggy bank that has 3 slots instead of 1. We use it all often and we talk about it. And you have one that slot is for spending, 1 slot is for saving, and 1 slot is for giving, for donating.
Nice.
And it's a very good tool to help youngsters learn money and learn that it's not all about saving, because a lot of people, they talk about the piggy bank and it's saving, and then the child's like, well, when do I get to spend? Well, or donate. Well, it's got to be a combination of all 3, and we highly preach those 3 slot piggy banks for that reason.
You must send me a link for someone when I can get my hands on it.
Sure.
I'd love to get that.
There are plenty of them. You could just say it's actually more common than you think.
I've never heard of one, but definitely want one.
I talk a lot about people living a life by design and not by default. And that's kind of how I've lived my life. When my kids were young, I relocated my office to be closer to home because I didn't want to have a half hour to an hour and a half commute every day. And I've always tried to live in that fashion. And I think that this seems to fit into your values and teachings also, in terms of not just doing things by default, but living it by design. Can you give us another example in terms of that, maybe with the financial piece, because that seems like your mainstay? How can our listeners, and how do you create for your clients to help them live this lifestyle by design and not by default?
Well, first and foremost, for the work close to home, I actually am across the road. Which is great because I've got the same view of the water from my office that I do from the house.
There you go.
But it does mean that I can sort of bop back and forth. So definitely with you on that one. I actually like to do it a bit backwards-ish. I like to say, rather than getting intentional about the money first, let's get intentional about what we want the money for. And the more time that I ask people to explore this, the more often I find that people actually don't know what they want the money for. And if they don't know what the money is for, then there's no emotional imprint to actually impress upon the unconscious to actually move towards it. And that's why people end up meandering. So what I actually do is I've got it's a process that we take people through in one of our programs, but we share it as well. I've got a free video on YouTube that speaks to this, something called the Ideal Life Blueprint. And what we do is you say to people, if you had to fit your ideal life into just 5 areas, what would those 5 areas be? And we get them to, you can brainstorm first and then group them, but you want to get it down to 5 areas. And then those 5 areas, we want to have an emotional state that we correlate to each one. And then we can start to develop role models in each one. We can start to develop who our mentors are going to be in each one. But most importantly, we can start to actually map out what level of abundance we actually need to experience that in our life. If someone says that they want to travel a lot and they want freedom to travel, okay, well, let's start looking at what that's going to look like. You're probably going to need some financial freedom because you're probably not going to be able to do that working your 9 to 5. People are going to say, hey, I want to have freedom to be by the beach. That means a lot to me. That's really important. Okay, well, what are some beach locations? Let's start working it out. Now I can create a roadmap for what sort of income I need, what sort of capital can lead to the creation of that income if I don't want to create value myself, but want to invest in others. And I can start to look at the longevity of that. I can then start to look at legacy. How am I going to map this out so that it works for my kids? But it starts with knowing what we want. The intentionality of what we need in terms of finances definitely starts with the intentionality in what we want to create.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a great point. And to have money without knowing what it's going to get us or what we want to use it for is kind of useless because then we end up just spending frivolously and running up bills, as you probably experienced early on in your life and saw it happen firsthand. So I think that's a great point. Build the blueprint, build the picture of where you want to be, and backtrack, build a plan on how you're going to get there, and then go back into the money factor. So I think that's a great way of looking at things. So Dan, listen, you've shared a lot with us. What are the next steps for Dan and your community? What's the next big thing you're working on?
So I was actually going to do a book this year called Stop Meditating. And then I was like, do you know what? We've just re-edited my bestseller, Stepping Beyond Intention, which is the book all about beyond intention. We put a new cover on it and I've given it a clean edit. We've updated it based on some new learnings. So, I really want to spend some time sharing that with the world. So that should be ready probably by the time this podcast is out. We're going to be sharing that. So I'm really going to be going on the speaking circuit, especially as things are opening up a bit more now, and just sharing that with people. I'm doing a lot of virtual events this year, really enjoying that, virtual workshops here and there. We're trying to get in one a month. And that's what I'm really enjoying. I'm writing for some cool magazines right now. By the time this comes out, it should be formalized. I'm not supposed to talk about it yet, but I'll talk about it. There's a couple of really solid magazines that I'm going to be writing regularly for, and just sharing these concepts, these ideas of intentionality, of money DNA, of self-responsibility and being open and learning, and just sharing my experiences through some more writing mediums. That's what's up for me for sure.
Awesome. Well, we'll be looking forward to it and be following you to make sure and that we stay on top of it and see those new things coming out.
Thank you.
You've definitely piqued my interest. So
thank you very much, man.
Listen, it's been a pleasure having you on. We end every show by asking all of our guests the same question. So this will be no different. And we want to know, and I think this is going to be a good one. I don't know. I just have a feeling. What did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
Definitely some snuggles with my son before I left this morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's awesome.
My wife's
it goes
Russian.
by like this, you know?
But my wife's Russian. My family's originally from Zimbabwe. My parents from Zimbabwe. So we actually honored both of our heritages in his name. So his name is Ethan, but he's also got a Russian name and he's got a Zulu name. And his Zulu name is Vuyo, which means joy. And it's just a joy to go and get my snuggles in the morning before I go out on the day. It reminds me of what I'm doing it for, holds me accountable to being a good man today.
Sure.
Wanting him to be proud of me, but definitely fills me my joy tank for the day.
I love that. My joy tank, my job as for my joy tank got nixed this year because my joy used to be driving my boys to school each morning until my oldest got his driver's license, and now I got nixed and he drives himself and his brother, and I'm out like trout.
You're out.
Yeah, we'll have to figure it out. But listen, we're going to have all your information in the show notes. But if people want to reach out and find you, learn more about you and what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
Dreamwithdan.com. Very easy to remember. Dreamwithdan.com. Got free resources, details of any workshops we're doing. There's always something cool happening. Dreamwithdan.com.
Fantastic, Dan. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us today, and make it a great day.
Thank you.
I want to thank Dan Mangena for being a guest on the Mitlin Money Mindset. Dan took his late-stage diagnosis of Aspergers and turned it into a life mission to help others live a life of abundance, joy, and purpose. He is living his dream life and wants to help countless others do the same using the system that helped him work past his diagnosis. Dan is an inspiration to everyone who has ever received unexpected news that could have a negative impact on their life. He shows us it can be overcome. Dan can be found across all social media platforms, and all the contact information needed to find him can be found in the show notes. Thank you for joining us this week on the Mitlin Money Mindset. Make sure you visit our website at mitlinmoneymindset.com and smash the subscribe button so you don't miss a show. We encourage you to help others find our valuable content, and please don't keep us a secret. You can also schedule an Is There a Fit call right from our website or by using the link that you'll find in the description section of your podcast player or app. And be sure to join us for our next episode to learn more about getting your mind right when it comes to all things money.
The opinions voiced in the Mitlin Money Mindset Show with Lawrence Sprung are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy ensures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Guests on the Mitlin Money Mindset Show are not affiliated with CWM LLC.